And that's what climate change is about. It is literally, not figuratively, a clear and present danger.
We are in the beginning of a mass extinction.
The ability of CO2 to do the heavy work of creating a climate catastrophe is almost nil at this point.
The price of oil has been artificially elevated to the point of insanity.
That's not how you power a modern industrial system.
The ultimate goal of this renewable energy, plan is to reach the exact same point that we're at now.
You know who's tried that? Germany. 7 straight days of no wind for Germany. Their factories are shutting down.
They really do act like weather didn't happen prior to 1910.
Today is Friday.
Thank you for that predictable introduction, Greta.
How dare you?
We are going to be doing yet another edition of Climate Change Roundtable, and we are going to be talking about children. No, not Greta, because she doesn't do any actual work. We're talking about the kids that are doing the dirty work of green energy. One of the things that's happened in the United States since President Nixon formed the Environmental Protection Administration back around 1970 is that we've exported a lot of our jobs and manufacturing overseas. And overseas, they don't care as much about things like child labor or the environment. And so we end up with green energy having a very, very dark backside. With me today is our usual panel of experts. We have Linnea Lueken and Sterling Burnett. And Sterling is going to be taking the lead on many of the things that we're going to discuss this day because he presented at our ICCC 15 just last month a very interesting presentation on child labor and exploitation when it comes to green energy. Thank you both for being here today.
Looking forward to it.
Always good. Sterling, I think you should introduce your background on this because you aren't just interested in this topic randomly, but your education is actually in ethics.
Well, my PhD is in applied philosophy. I specialize in environmental ethics, and I have always, throughout my career at Heartland and before that at the National Center for Policy Analysis, looked at. I always think about ethics first, right and wrong. What's moral? And one of the things that has troubled me, a lot of my friends think ethics is, well, they do a cost benefit analysis and that determines what's right or wrong. I don't think so. Sometimes something can be efficient and wrong. But what troubles me with green energy is that it's efficient and immoral. It's even if the benefits of green energy were apparent, even if it could compete in the marketplace without huge subsidies, without government mandates and support, it's still the way it is produced, the mining, where it takes place, the labor that goes into it for the minerals that are critical to all these energy technologies. We could be producing a lot of them here. We aren't. We think too much of our people, but we think it's okay to offshore our pollution and labor, slave labor, child labor to other countries to satisfy our green dreams. And I think that's immoral and wrong.
All righty. So we agree that it's immoral because we've all seen the pictures, we've seen the videos, we've seen the stories of exploitation, of sickness and death, even associated with children and young adults doing all of this dirty work in what wouldn't even be classified as a mine here in the United States, but more like just a dirty pit. And so, Sterling, you've been following all this. Here we've got some videos of some of the actual mines that are going on and what people are doing. I mean, this is the kind of labor that you would expect to see in prison camps.
Look at that kid right there. That's not an adult. That's not someone who made a conscious choice, a fully informed choice to go to these mines. And we think it's okay. It's like, oh, well, we've got some kind of memorandum of understanding that we're going to reduce child labor. And then Biden goes to Congo and says, hey, we want more stuff from you and not China. Well, we're going to produce more of this.
This is a cobalt mine in the Congo. And cobalt is one of the rare earths that is being used to make magnets and things like that for electric motors for, Teslas and Fiskars and other types of electric cars and electric things, also for wind turbines. So, is this really what we want out of green energy? I mean, do we really want to be exploiting people so that we can have virtue signaling in the Western worlds?
Well,
I don't know.
Can we still, is there any sense in which we can call it clean energy when you see this? I think you have to understand we're going to need cobalt and lithium and all sorts of yttrium and rare earths and minerals and copper. We're going to need those for a lot of technologies. Every energy technology uses some of these materials. But I think we have lined up a couple of graphics that show that green energy technologies, by far and away, use more of these materials than any other energy source. So I think it's 3 and 4. Yeah. So.
Wow, look at that. The conventional car versus the electric car and how much difference there is.
Yep, I think we lost Sterling for a second there.
Yeah, he's frozen with a grimace on his face.
Andy, I
Unfortunately.
think it must be the feds. They just don't want Sterling talking about this. If you go back to the previous slide, Andy, and talk about the exact minerals that are required for these kinds of technologies, I think that, of course, as Sterling said, all technology requires these materials, but the quantities that are used here are way above and beyond for green technology, as opposed to, your cell phone and that kind of thing. It looks like Sterling's back.
Sterling is back now.
I got no idea why Fridays. I think it's a cabal, arrayed against me that Fridays my my Wi-Fi goes down. So I don't know if anyone heard what I said about the graphic about electric vehicles versus cars. Did we get that or not?
Yes, we did. We did.
I don't know what you heard, what you didn't.
I didn't. I don't think we heard anything from you, Sterling.
Well,
so you might
well,
want to
here
give
it
us
is. Look, you just look at it for a second. They're almost not on the same scale. The minerals needed for a conventional car versus the minerals needed for an electric car. Every electric car uses a lot of child and slave labor. You could produce all the minerals for a conventional car from the Congo, from China, all of them, without child and slave labor for a conventional car. But to get that, because it's 20 to 40% of the labor in Congo is child labor. Well, we cover that easily for conventional cars without that, not for your electric vehicles. And then if you go to the electric, look at that. So offshore wind, the biggest. What's the next? Onshore wind. What's the next? Solar PV. So it's like, hold it. We are mandating through our policies in the West. We are guaranteeing that slaves will continue to be enslaved, that children will continue to work in these horrific conditions, die young, to satisfy our quest. They're not building these wind turbines in these countries. Congo doesn't have vast solar arrays. They're doing it for us because we did.
I would point out, Sterling, that the bottom three, nuclear, coal, and natural gas, which make up the bulk of energy in the United States that is produced and used, is highly regulated by agencies like OSHA, where there is no child slave labor, and they have regulations about coal mining and so forth and so on. But the solar, the wind, those are all manufactured overseas for the most part, where there is none of this regulation, none of this oversight.
And if you look at that, a lot of these minerals, I don't see the breakdown, and that might be my fault. I know this is my slide. But some of the stuff on there is like copper. Well, copper is not being produced using slave labor. And many things. But your cobalt, your lithium, a lot of the stuff is not, even when it's not produced using slave labor, you got to understand, where are these minerals refined? In other words, where's the finished product come from? Both the finished mineral and most often the finished retail product, which is the actual wind turbine, the actual battery, the actual solar panel. China. And China uses slave labor. If you don't, if you like slave labor, you got to love China because they've got whole minorities that they use. Uyghurs, the Falun Gong sect. You don't have to think. I don't know enough about Falun Gong to know if I have any feelings about their religious practices, or the Uyghurs to know if I feel anything about their religious practice. What I do know is they ought to be able to worship as they wish, and they shouldn't be slaves. And yet, that's how China's using them in these re-education camps. I can talk about this all day. We could talk about this all day. I think the most powerful thing to show this is that right there. Look at that. There's some of those child laborers. Look at that. Look at the ages of these kids that are working the mines. Just linger on it for a second. There's another one. No, that was okay. Go ahead.
One of the points that we should probably make, Sterling, is that, when it comes to rare earth mining, people have pointed this out a lot. It's good to reiterate. It's not that these materials are rare in the crust in total. There is a lot of cobalt, there's a lot of lithium, but it's spread out relatively thin. You don't get big veins of it the way that you get for copper or other materials for a lot of these. And a lot of these rare earths, you need to move a ton of dirt, way more dirt than you need to move for coal mining or something, in order to get economic quantities out of the stone that it's coming out of.
Okay, wait for a second, Linnea. I want to go back. Could you go back to the slides, please? I just want people to see. This is a woman who goes and labors, and what she's doing is she's putting her child in a box to leave it there while she goes down and works in the mines. That's the crib. Right there, where all the dust is, where all the rocks are. Boy, that looks safe to me. Go back another slide, please. I mean, I just want to focus on the pictures for a bit. I want you to think about that. Do you want your kid, your grandkid, your nieces or nephews doing that labor? Would you find that at all acceptable? Would you sue? Would you, protest? Where are those protests in the streets? Go back another slide, please. God, look at that. What are they? 5? 8? 10? I don't know. Doing hard labor. You think it was a chain gang in Louisiana or something?
Yeah. Greta talks about stealing her childhood, that climate change has stolen her childhood. Well, look at this, Greta.
How dare you?
As she trains in yachts around the world, her childhood is stolen. No, their childhood is stolen. They're adult. They may not reach adulthood. Look, I think we've got a news story about a mine.
Yep, we ran that video earlier. Andy, if you can bring up that news story that we ran. It was a clip showing the mining and a couple of anchors. No, that wasn't it. I think that's it. Yes, here it is. That's not it. You had it.
You had it.
World's biggest tech companies are being sued over child mining debts in the Democratic Republic of Congo. A human rights group filed a lawsuit on behalf of 14 Congolese families. They accuse companies like Apple, Google, Dell, Microsoft, and Tesla from benefiting from child labor to mine cobalt. That mineral is key to powering batteries used in our cell phones, computers, and our electric cars.
CBS News launched an investigation into child cobalt miners in Congo last year. And foreign correspondent Deborah Pata exposed the horrific conditions, and now she's taking a closer look at this unprecedented lawsuit.
Kids are still doing the unthinkable in the DRC, backbreaking work even for adults. But a world away in Washington, there's new hope for the children in a lawsuit filed against major American tech companies who use the cobalt.
Yeah. So we some people are filing a lawsuit here, but the point is, it's not as if the Biden administration doesn't know this. It's not as if Democrats in Congress don't know this. It's not as if all the people pushing for offshore wind, the largest demand for the magnets that help drive wind turbines that the Cobalt's needed. They know this, and yet Biden is pushing 30,000 wind turbines off the East Coast alone. And are they allowing mining here? No. Every mine that they try and open, the Biden administration withdraws the land from use. And you say, oh, well, we'll go to other sources besides Congo. No, in fact, to get away from China, he just signed agreements to get more materials from Africa, including Congo. We don't want to rely on China, so let's get more from Congo. Well, that's, it's hard to be disgusted enough by this. And most Americans blindly say, oh, well, we're saving the environment, or these technologies are good for the world. And they are blind to the harms. And it's not just Congo. I think Andy's got a few pictures from China as well. China's harder, right? They've got a pretty strong government there. It's harder to get images sneaked out of well, but here's a great picture. I don't know how they got that one out. I'm sure China is not happy that someone was able to get it out. But here's a picture of there's a good old re-education camp. Let's put together motherboards. That's Falun Gong, right? There's another one of those healthy mine workers in China. It's, like I said, it's not just Africa.
Well, and Sterling, it's pretty awful when you see, politicians and green activists, carrying water for the Chinese government over this, because I have seen tons of arguments from their side saying, well, if you don't like it, then you just shouldn't have electronics, period. Or if you don't like it, well, the Chinese say that they're compensating these people, so technically they're not slaves. I've heard this over and over again, and I would love to know, where's that argument for historic slavery in the U.S. or something, or the internment of the Japanese during World War II. I mean, they're not going to bring up an excuse for that because it wasn't something that they benefited from. But as soon as it's something that is, related to the green money that's floating around, all their funding and grants, all of a sudden they just think that it's totally fine. It's just part of doing business to them.
No, that's exactly right. These people are benefiting from this, or they're pushing it. They're either pushing the technologies or benefiting from the technologies, or both. And so they can't have these things cut off. You talk about, you compared it. Think about prisons in the U.S. today. They have largely, I don't think, I could be wrong. I don't think, you see the old chain gangs anymore, where guys have, weights around their ankles and they're out busting rocks and cutting roads.
Well, maybe not that, but I just came here from South Louisiana, and they definitely do have kind of chain gangs, but not hard labor, like picking up trash on the road, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And they
maybe
press license plates, and they get, and even while they're in prison, they get a little, they don't just get room and board, and they get health care. They get a small stipend so that when they come out of prison, they walk away with a little money. First off, the Falun Gong and the Uyghurs, a lot of them aren't walking out of prison. They're there. They'll be re-educated for life until a bullet gets put in the back of their brain. I guess they are getting room and board while they're imprisoned. The question is, could they choose not to? In the end, you can walk away from work here in the U.S. unless you committed a crime and you're in prison. Yeah. You can choose a different job. I don't think these people have much choice.
Given that California is the leading green state with all of the the highest saturation of green technology and, electric car mandates and all that sort of thing, maybe, just maybe, we can get California to provide a bill to provide retribution to the slaves in China. I mean, they've already done it for the non-existent slaves in California, right?
Yeah, reparations, yeah. No, the appalling nature of it is, so the Biden administration knows this. We've actually passed a law that's supposed to ban products using slave labor from the Uyghurs in China. And they have, I think they blocked 1,000 solar panels. 1,000 solar panels were blocked from China because it ran afoul of this law. How many tens of thousands more have come in? How good's our tracking in China of this? Do we have a lot of spies on the ground there saying, yep, that's slave labor, that's not. That one's okay, that one's not. I suspect not. And we have we have the minerals here. And the Biden administration says, he came in saying, we're going to do more mining here. We're going to produce these minerals here. And then mine after mine after mine, he has blocked or withdrawn. Just recently in Minnesota, he withdrew an area where they were going to do some mining for minerals necessary for his green energy push. The same in the House Resources Commission, committee had a hearing on this. They've done it in Alaska. They've done it all over. Every place you want to open a new mine, Biden says no. And in the laughingly called Inflation Reduction Act, Biden touted, he went out on the road and said, by God, I'm the labor president. This is for American workers. There are provisions in the Inflation Reduction Act that say the EV technologies and the charging stations must be built using minerals and constructed here in the U.S. And then about 3 or 4 weeks ago, it turns out the physics and reality hit the Biden administration in the face. And they found out that if you want all these electric vehicle chargers that you promised in your speeches, we can't get them from here. And so he immediately waived those provisions. He touted them. He says, I'm giving labor jobs. And then he waives the provisions that would give labor those jobs, that would get the stuff done here. And of course, now Joe Manchin is threatening to sue the administration over that precise provision that he only signed on because Biden said, oh, we're going to build this here and it's in the law. And now he wants to just get rid of when the law is inconvenient to his green energy utopia, we're just going to waive those provisions and thus, getting back to sort of the topic, increase and continue slave labor in China and the Congo and elsewhere. So you can't. I remember a time when I was young when Democrats were constantly on the air railing for human rights and saying we shouldn't put business among human rights. We shouldn't do business with countries that were violating human rights. Here, with eyes open, they're pushing for more business with countries that abuse human rights. What happened to that party?
Yeah, I remember we used to have things like concerts for Bangladesh and so forth, and all of this concern over the treatment of humans worldwide. That seems to have evaporated completely with the advent of green energy. It's a devil may care, full speed ahead, damn the torpedoes kind of an attitude associated with green energy, that green energy is far more important now than human rights. That seems to be the mantra of the left. And it basically points out what I've said again and again. Environmentalism basically ruins almost everything it touches because these folks are not mathematically or science inclined. It's all about how they feel. And the feeling doesn't substitute for good engineering and good practice. It just doesn't. And that's why we end up with these messes.
Well, and Anthony, too, where's their feeling for the people that are engaging in slave labor? You know, where if it is just based on feeling, because I have begun to suspect that the emotional appeals that the far extreme, environmentalist side makes are just kind of cover for what they want to accomplish. That they don't really have these strong humanitarian or nature feelings when it comes to things that they want to achieve and get their own way with. Because where are their feelings for the whales that are being killed off the East Coast right now?
Right.
Where are their feelings for the mountaintops that China has sliced off to install solar? Where are their feelings for the child labor or the slave labor in China? I mean, I don't think that they actually are all that empathetic. I think that they are, so long as they can leverage it to get their way, but they really don't care.
Yeah,
I think you're spot on, Linnea. I think that's it. That it's all a cover for control and their whole vision of the future, their utopian future, and these other things, they're just annoyances that get in the way.
Look, many of these people are misanthropes. They just don't like most humans. That's why they can say that the ideal human population, like one environmental philosopher wrote, is 200 million people. How do we get there? That's why they can admire China, despite the fact that it emits twice as much CO2 emissions than all the other industrial countries combined at this stage. They can still say it's doing good, it's doing green. Why? Because it has strict population control policies. They like population control. Humans are the ultimate problem. I've seen them say it. They're the cancer on the earth. And if a virus comes along and wipes them out, the earth will be better off for it. So they don't care, perhaps, because if kids are dying, if slaves are dying, that's just fewer people. And they're okay with that. But the thing is, they're supposed to care about the environment, right? Some of those pictures from China that I had in there were showing atrocious environmental conditions. The waters are being polluted, the land is being polluted, and it's not just there. As Linnea mentioned, okay, do you care about whales and dolphins? You used to. A lot of focus has been on the North Atlantic right whale with these wind farms, but it's not just the right whale. Not just 10 dolphins have died, or 12 dolphins have 100, dozens, hundreds of dolphins are dying in the North Atlantic. I guess I remember when environmentalists took to the streets to get dolphin safe tuna, made the law of the land. What about dolphin safe wind turbines?
How about dolphin safe Teslas?
I don't see any of that.
Put a sticker on this side.
It's amazing how their principles go away when they find a bigger cause. And by the way, not coincidentally, I think the bigger cause requires ever bigger government.
Oh, of course.
It's all about power and whatever gives them the most power.
Right. Empire building to further the cause. That's all it is. And, you're absolutely right, Sterling. The whole key to this thing is the fact that they just simply, they'll make a statement about what's important, years ago, whether it's whales or it's dolphins, tuna cans, whatever. But as soon as they get that new cause, that one that they're, captures the imagination and gets the press, they'll just run with that and forget about the rest of it. They have no scruples. They have no integrity.
Well, in the 70s, it was global cooling and the next ice age was coming. And the response was bigger government, more government control. Before global warming, it was chemicals. Some of you may not remember this, but I was working it when they were talking about endocrine disruptors and chemicals. And the answer was bigger government control. Yep. Endangered species, bigger government. It doesn't matter the problem. It doesn't matter the cause of the problem. It doesn't matter the impact of the problem. The answer is, and as far as I can tell, always it will be for these folks, more government control. Because they really think they or the bureaucratic elites who they support know how people ought to live. in very detailed fashion. What should your toilet look like and how much water should it hold? What should your dishwasher look like and how much water should it use? And let's get those smart thermostats so we can control what you set it at, which is, by the way, what they're doing in Europe now. Everyone's said, oh, the smart thermostats, it'll save you money. Smart thermostats. Yeah. But the real reason they want smart thermostats is because then the government either owned or regulated utilities can control your use.
Exactly.
That's what it's ultimately all about.
I personally avoid any product that's got the word smart in it because I know I'm a smart person. I don't need to be told. Anyway, bottom line is the history that we've been getting into. If you want to review the history of environmental predictions, this is a perfect thing to go through here. This is a fantastic summary of all of the 50 years of failed eco-apocalyptic predictions that, are all supposedly solved by bigger government. And so let's run through a few of those. I mean, they're just dire famine forecast by 1975. Gosh, it's already too late. We're still here. No. Lack of time. New ice age by 21st century. Didn't happen at all. Then there's our favorite doomsayer, Dr. Ehrlich, outspoken ecologist, telling us that, we're going to have famine and population reductions and death and everything before the year 2000. Didn't happen.
Made hundreds of predictions over the years. As far as I can determine, not a single one of them has come true. And yet he's still cited as an expert. As recently as this year on 60 Minutes, he's like in his 90s. And they're still going to him as an expert, despite the fact that he has never been right. He insists
that he's never been wrong, which is the most amazing part.
Yeah,
I'd love to see a parody video of the McLaughlin group where they go through each one of these and that guy shouts, "Wrong!"
Yeah, McLaughlin just wrong. The correct answer is.
Yeah. So, it's just amazing. All of these environmental predictions that have been made, that have been covered in the media, about the doom that's just around the corner, just on the horizon, just a few years down the road, if we don't act now, have all been proven wrong. And it's a pattern with the left and a pattern with the news media where they don't bother to check facts. They just say, doom is coming. We have to act now. It's that whole activist mentality that they've got. And it always comes out wrong. And I want to point out, by the way, that a lot of these elements that you're seeing here in this document are going to show up on a new feature that we have coming on What's Up With That. We're going to have an interactive timeline where you're going to be able to go through all of these things and see where the doom prediction was made and see the outcome. And we're going to have that feature up probably in about a week. So you might want to look at that. But at the same time, I want to go back to Sterling and say, Sterling, why do you think they keep repeating these same mistakes over and over and over again?
It's amazing. Hell, even a stopped clock is right twice a day. Ehrlich's never been right once. If you look at a stopped clock and it's midnight or noon, you wouldn't say, well, it got that right, so there's no need to repair it. But with Ehrlich, he's never wrong. And there's no need to correct him or to find somebody else to talk to. And that's not just Ehrlich. I wish it were just one loon scientist, right? It's dozens of them, the whole Club of Rome. The first prediction of the decline and disappearance of oil came about 10 years after we first developed the first underground well. A few years ago, I think Abel Windsor pointed out a great point. Who saved the whales? Well, Rockefeller. when he started producing kerosene, we weren't using whale oil. We didn't have to rely on whale oil anymore, right? So it's and now his progenitors, this generation of Rockefellers, the Rockefeller Fund, is once again is contributing to the destruction of whales through the push of offshore wind. you asked me, Anthony, why they keep doing this. And honestly, I always say this, I can't get in people's heads. I don't know their other people's motivations, but we can make some educated guesses. And it seems to me the best educated guess is money and power.
Either that or mental illness. I don't know which.
Yeah, well, it may be a combination of the two. But big green groups raise a lot of money on causes.
That's
They
true.
used to raise it on saving the whale. Now they raise it on saving the earth from climate change, even at the expense of the whale, evidently.
Right.
A lot of money, hundreds of millions of dollars a year go to the top green groups.
Yep.
Now, government bureaucrats, I never once, not once, have I seen a government bureaucrat go in to testify before Congress at budget time and say, you know what, my agency needs less funding this year. We don't even need what we had last year. We need to start cutting funding. We don't want as much staff. We've solved the problem we were created to solve. And so let's just fold this baby. I've never seen that.
Yeah, if that happened, C-SPAN would cut off the video feed.
Yeah, every year they go in asking for more as they claim they have more needs. Why? Because they've got mission creep. Every year they try and go into new things that they were never doing before and stop focusing on the old things. And so they need more staff, more layers of bureaucracy so they can rise up that bureaucracy, and more money. And so psychologically, I can't get in their heads. All I can say is I don't think it's coincidence that green groups keep growing and raising money on causes that give them a lot of power. They go and influence government, and government keeps growing and demanding more power because, look, I've been around 59 years now. Every one of those years, probably between 5 and 20,000 new regulations go on the books. If you talk about pages in the Federal Register, did I really need that kind of micromanagement? I mean, really, would I not have survived 59 years if I hadn't had millions of pages added to the Federal Register to tell me how to drive, what to drive, what toilet to use, how much energy my dishwasher or washing machine used, how to build a garage, what materials are allowed. I just don't believe it. I don't believe that was all necessary to make mine and everybody else's lives better.
Yeah, it's like the tags that are on mattresses that you're not supposed to remove. Everybody just looks at that and goes, "Yeah, rip." It's a pointless exercise in futility for these regulations. Most people don't give a whit whatsoever about this tag or what it says. Have you seen electrical cords lately? Go to the hardware store and buy a new electrical cord. There's 3 tags on it. One of them says, there's electricity in here. You may die. Watch out. Another one says, this one conforms to regulations about pollution and chemicals. Then another one says, there may be cancer-causing materials in here. I mean, it's insane. Absolutely insane, the micro-regulation of this stuff. Now, speaking of insanity, for those of you that are out there in the cloud watching us talk about all of this, I want to point out that we have a feature called SuperChat. And this SuperChat feature allows you to ask a question. Now, of course, you can ask a regular question in comments as well, but the SuperChat feature allows you to send a little money our way, but at the same time, make an extended question or comment that we will put up prominently. So if you want to do that, look it up on your comments feed and try it out. So back to you guys. What's in the future for us? I mean, are we all going to be living in a utopian future where every aspect of our day is managed by some regulation where we have to report what we're doing?
Well, one, that would not be utopia.
It depends on your viewpoint.
That would be disaster. You will own nothing and be happy is, a cute slogan for something that would end up being horrific in the end.
Own nothing, be happy.
It's it's almost too creepy for words, and people try to rationalize it, right? The whole idea that we can have a totally planned communities, totally planned economy, totally planned environmental preservation or whatever they want, like the corridor project that the old Agenda 21 proposed and that they're still holding on to. The idea that, you know, human population needs to be restrained to a very few specific locations and the rest of it needs to be left back to wilderness. And one of the things that we haven't mentioned yet that I would like to point out really quickly, kind of tangentially to over-managing and ending up killing people because of it, you know, if we ban fossil fuels, if we go all the way towards, you know, just wind and solar, nothing else, not only will we have blackouts and all of that, but also this whole leave it in the ground idea. How are we going to feed the people that are doing the mining, right? It's not like they're eating very well currently. So if you make it even harder to mass produce food, what's that going to do for us? You're creating an entire underclass of people in the third world and even in the second world who are not going to be able to live to the standards that we can in the first world. Now, we might see some starvation or some problems with food security in the first world if we continue to do things like banning fossil fuel derived fertilizers, right? We might see some of that, but we won't see nearly the effects of that India will, or that the Congo will, or anywhere else that depends on, you know, food for their growing populations. And so it's comfortable for people like, you know, Bill Gates or John Kerry, as Sterling and I wrote an op-ed recently on, or you know, any of those other number of coastal elites. They're not going to have to suffer from these choices. And like Sterling pointed out, they didn't even think ahead to find out if we had enough materials to do what they want to do.
Yeah.
The idea that these
salient
people will
point.
manage everything is completely absurd.
Right. Well, they've got it worked out. They worked it out back in 1974 with Soylent Green. That's what it's going to be for the future.
Oh,
well,
we're so
look,
close.
we're already there. Soylent Green is insects now, but remember, many states are passing laws allowing you to compost your loved one. I know I want my loved one in corn sprouting up. So in one real sense, soon Soylent Green may be people. I want to talk a little bit about the flip side of the green imperialism. It's not just that we are exploiting these people for our green energy desires. We are at the same time, simultaneously, and Vijay Jayaraj of the CO2 Coalition points this out in numerous articles. We're at the same time denying them access to the fossil fuels that have made our development possible, right? We're saying World Bank won't give you loans for this. If you do this, we won't give you food. We won't when necessary. If you develop coal. Now, China was profiting on this tremendously, both geopolitically and economically, because through their Silk Road initiative says, hey, the World Bank and all these international agencies from the US and the UN won't give you money to build coal-fired power plants. We'll do it. And they were building dozens. But now China has said, oh, we're not going to do that anymore. We're still building hundreds here, but we're not going to do that because we're committed to climate change. My suspicion is they're getting funding somehow because some are still going forward, probably from China. But the point is, we think we know best for them what their development should look like. And it shouldn't look like what made us happy and healthy and wealthy. It should look very different. And so it's not just that we are exploiting them for our energy needs today. We're denying them access to energy, to a livable life, to food, because we say that's bad for them. That development is bad for them, and we know best. We're still the Papa, colonialist papas. I can see Gates and Kerry and Biden in their white seersucker suits sitting on the plantation porch sipping their mint julep, telling these people, you can't have a coal-fired power plant. It's bad for you. All
righty. So we've got We've got about 15 minutes left in the program, and I think we've covered most of the bases pretty well. We have a few questions that people have brought up that we have saved for discussion now. Here's one from Michael Johansson. Did you see the report on the Finnish Geological Institute with calculation of how much metal we need for 1 generation of zero fossil fuel energy production? Sterling, I think you've probably got the point on this.
Well, actually, I haven't seen their reports, so I don't know what they say. I have seen reports that say the green energy revolution, just Biden's goals, would require I forget whether it was $23 trillion or $123 trillion, but it was an enormous sum. But I haven't seen this report, so I can't.
I've seen briefly. I have not read the whole report, but I have spotted a couple of stories about it. And basically, the end result is it's just not possible. In order to get the entire just first world onto entirely zero fossil fuel energy is not, I mean, it's just not going to happen physically.
It's physically not possible. I said that a long time ago. And the labor force required to build manufacturing here, refining here. If you really wanted to do everything Biden said that we're going to do and string all the wires and build all the turbines and erect them all, there's not a labor force in the U.S., which I think is in part why Democrats like open borders, because we're going to need all those laborers to string all those wires and refine all those minerals that we don't want our kids who they have to go to college to do.
Well, and I'm a proponent of, just for the cool factor alone and for the idea of exploration and everything. I liked when a couple of years ago there were quite a few companies that were talking about starting to do some off-Earth mining. Of course, how do you get there? You are not going to do off-Earth mining without fossil fuels, period. It's not going to happen. Not just, obviously if you're traveling around in space, you can use all sorts of different propulsion that doesn't necessarily require fossil fuels, but getting off the ground does. And a lot of your support systems are going to be depending on solar, but that's an entirely different animal in space than on Earth. So that'll be a toughie for there. But yeah, no, we basically cannot, without significant external resources, go all electric or all no fossil fuel.
Even some utilities here in the U.S. and some of the agencies that manage utilities here in the U.S., federal and state, they're now putting out reports quietly. They're releasing them quietly. It's not getting a lot of headlines, but they're releasing them quietly, saying, if we do this green energy transition, it will make the electric grid less reliable. We'll have more blackouts. We'll have more brownouts. People at critical times will lose power. Industries will have to shut down because we're going to have to divert power. That's what they're saying, and they're the ones that know a little bit about this.
Okay, so we have more questions coming up from our viewers. Let's put up the next one. We basically have questions. Let's see here.
Well,
Has Greta said anything about the millions of tons of natural gas that were released from Nord Stream 2 and the sabotaged? Crickets.
I'm not aware. Yeah, I'm not aware of anything. But Gary had a question that was, he saw a report recently that renewables recently exceeded coal production. Well, that's what the report said. It said that not production, but energy, electricity from coal, that in the U.S. It had exceeded that as a percentage. I don't know if it's true. I haven't done an analysis of the report. Certainly, if you're talking capacity, it's almost certainly true now. There's more renewable, there's more wind capacity in Texas now than there is coal. That doesn't mean that it supplies more electricity to the grid than coal does. Two different things. So I'm not sure what that report was talking about. I haven't had time to look at it. But if it's talking capacity, it might well be true. I think capacity of coal is down to 20 or 14%. But if you're talking about overall energy supply, certainly not. Because remember, we're not just talking about electricity. We're talking about fuel for vehicles, for transport. And that ain't electric yet, folks. If you're talking, but my suspicion is it's not even true for the delivered electricity. But it said it surpassed nuclear, it surpassed hydroelectric, which is a renewable. So I'm a little, I wonder, how it's like, well, okay, that's a renewable. Why don't you include that? Because if you included that, it would make the case even better.
Well, they've decided that they hate hydro now because California keeps taking down their dams and all sorts of fun stuff. So they don't. Hydro is out. We're not doing hydro anymore.
Yep. So, can you discuss the well-mixed theory in terms of water vapor and CO2 influencing global temperatures? Yet neither is well mixed generally and seasonally. Well, there's maps that have been produced of carbon dioxide and water vapor in the atmosphere, and they're lumpy. I don't have one quickly at hand that I can show you, but I can tell you that I've seen these maps. One of them is from the OCO, the Orbiting Carbon Observatory, and it showed where carbon dioxide is strongest and where it's lowest. And you look at that and you think, well, geez, where is the well mixed in this whole thing? And the bottom line is that it isn't well mixed throughout the entire planet. There are hot spots and there are cold spots for carbon dioxide and water vapor. Interestingly enough, on the Orbiting Carbon Observatory maps that have been produced, and they haven't been making a lot of them lately because I think they're embarrassed to publish them, they show hot spots not in cities, not in the United States. I mean, there's some, but not the major hot spots. They're in weird places like the Amazon and the Sahara. I mean, it's just, you wonder what's going on, Yeah, so it's obviously not as well mixed as they think.
And while thinking about his question and listening to you, Anthony, a question was raised with me, and I don't know anyone who's ever asked this. So the location of the station where we officially measure carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is the Mauna Loa Observatory in Hawaii. Is it just me that thinks maybe the best place to measure CO2 is not near a volcanically active, it's not a place surrounded by volcanoes where they're constantly emitting sulfur dioxide and carbon dioxide and other emissions almost continually? The flows for some of these volcanoes flow slowly, almost continually, even when there's not a major eruption. It seems to me you'd find a more pristine location to measure carbon dioxide, someplace not. We talk about the urban heat island effect for temperature stations. Well, I'm wondering about the carbon dioxide bias due to volcanic activity nearby.
Now, let me address that. Now, I realize this is a common, argument. It's a common, like, what are they thinking? Putting this thing on the side of a mountain that's got a volcano that's active.
Okay.
And I've looked at this time and time and time again. And I have a good friend, Forrest Mims, who writes about and does experiments at Mauna Loa. He's an amateur scientist, well respected by NASA and NOAA. In fact, NOAA commissioned him to go to the Mauna Loa Observatory and write a book about it. And he's a very data-driven guy, probably the most data-driven, down-to-earth, no-nonsense kind of a guy you'd want doing studies. And he doesn't have a problem with it. And the reason he doesn't have a problem with it is because NOAA has a strict protocol based on wind direction. When the wind direction is a certain way such that it could blow carbon dioxide into the sensors, they don't make any measurements. And in fact, they are shut down right now because of a recent lava flow. They've been shut down for weeks. And so there's other monitoring locations such as the Scripps Observatory and so forth in San Diego. Bottom line is, I trust the data coming out of Mauna Loa based on the procedures that I have seen. However, it is not completely representative of the Earth as we've learned from the Orbiting Carbon Observatory. Now remember, this program was started back in 1958, before we had satellites that could measure carbon dioxide. So its relevance in today's debate may be dwindling. The point is that it's literally the best record we've got of carbon dioxide. However, there are other ways, like with the Orbiting Carbon Observatory, that we can measure this. The idea was that because it's high in the atmosphere, up about 14,000 feet, we're not subject to the vagaries of winds and weather that are at lower levels, kind of like what Dr. Roy Spencer and Dr. John Christie do with their UAH satellite temperature measurement, which is at an elevation of 26,000 feet. Basically, down at the surface, everything is noisy, weather, emissions, the whole deal. But further up, it's more well-mixed and quieter. So that's the rationale for that.
Okay, well, I appreciate you answering that question. I didn't know.
Yeah.
And you said that some people have talked about it. I've just never seen it talked about before. But I'm wondering, so still, 14,000 feet is pretty high up there, but we've got other places that aren't volcanoes that we could set this up at? You know, I suspect there's a large partly Arctic National Wildlife Refuge that we could set up. And we have computers now. We have Wi-Fi. We have all sorts of things we didn't have back then where we could get these readings.
Okay.
But anyway, you've answered my question. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I will say that, yes, there are other locations where it could be measured, but whether it can be measured is another question. The biggest problem you have with things like scientific measurements is being able to reproduce them on a daily basis like they do. The problem that they've got at places like up at the mountains, up in the wildlife range and so forth, they get nasty, nasty weather at the top of these things. The advantage of Mauna Loa is that it generally has pleasant weather year-round. Occasionally they'll get a snowstorm, but it isn't debilitating. I mean, up in you pick a mountain in the United States, like in Alaska, for example, and say, well, we're going to put an observing lab up there. Well, you send a couple of people up there, and the next thing you know, they're stranded for 6 months, and they run out of supplies and all that other stuff, and they can't take measurements because they'll freeze to death if they go outside. All this other problem.
No, I wasn't thinking about mountains. The Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, most of it's flat plains.
Oh,
and you wouldn't have to have somebody on site. My point is, you have the automatic readings sent up. Now, storms are a problem, but you just said Mauna Loa has been shut down for 2 weeks, so It's not giving us anything because of volcanoes. So every site is going to have its problems, I suspect.
Yeah.
But Mauna Loa may have been the best site to do it now. When it was, I'm wondering if it still remains that, but I don't know. And you've answered the question anyway.
Okay, so let's move on to some of the next questions we have. Can you tell the story of government intervention to save the moose from wolves in Yellowstone? I know nothing about that one.
I know a lot about that.
Okay, it's up for you.
There's a great book called Playing God in Yellowstone by Austin Chase that details this.
Yeah.
And he also wrote another book called In a Dark Wood that details some of this. So they wanted to create a national park. There's no sanction in the Constitution for such a thing as a national park, but they wanted to create it. And there were huge debates at the time Yellowstone was created as opposed to, well, if this is so valuable, shouldn't we put it on the market? And then they say, well, it's valueless. Well, if it's valueless, if it has no value, then why are we going to lock it up? Because who's going to use it anyway? And so they had these huge debates. And then they were building the rails at this time. And the rails said, oh, we can profit from this. We can ship people out there on the rails. It'll give us traffic. And so they created the national park. And then they said, well, we want people want to see moose and they want to see elk. And they want to see this charismatic megafauna that are predated upon, not just by wolves, but also by bears. And so they started fiercely, paying people to kill wolves. But so people could come out and expect to experience elk and moose and be amazed at Yellowstone's wonder. And they were effective. The bear population dropped dramatically. Wolves were extirpated. When we wanted to put wolves back in, we had to go to Canada to get a different subspecies. The Rocky Mountain wolf no longer existed there. And the predictable result, if you knew anything about ecology, was, well, suddenly all those big herbivores, they started browsing farther and farther up trees, wiping out new growth. You had a lot of dead and dying trees built up because it was no longer managed by fire as the Native Americans had done historically for the good of the buffalo. Beaver disappeared because they didn't have the young trees. And you had these huge wildfires back in, I was there around then. So it must have been 96, 95, 96 or 97, somewhere around, or the earlier 90s even. I think it was there when I was there the first time. You had these huge wildfires that burned more than 2 million acres in around Yellowstone, largely because government knew best and knew how to manage wildlife. And they wiped out the wolves and largely wiped out the bears. Now they put them back in. They still, they could have allowed hunting. They didn't do that because it's a national park. And so they put wolves back in, and they've protected the bears. And the wildlife is largely fallen dramatically. Unfortunately, not just in Yellowstone, but around Yellowstone, which is affecting hunting around there because wolves are great predators. And
the ranchers aren't too happy about it.
Yeah, the ranchers aren't happy about it. The hunters aren't happy about it. But large ungulate populations have declined dramatically, and the trees are coming back, and the beaver are back. And so, look, the idea that somebody in Washington knows best how to manage an entire ecosystem was idiotic to start with. It started in the progressive era with Roosevelt's friends like Gifford Pinchot, and it continues to this date. We just keep fiddling.
Okay, so we have our final question up here. There's a paper that showed that through Fourier transform and wavelets of temperature proxies, that the sun is the main signal. Wouldn't that be the death knell for this whole thing? Well, you'd think so. My friend Willis Etchenbach, who writes regularly on whatsupwiththat.com, has looked for the solar signal again and again and again, and then a few times again after that. And, I used to be a firm believer that it was the sun. The sun was driving everything. Well, it's true. The sun is the main driver of energy here on the planet, whether it's, on a day-to-day basis or whether it's stored energy from fossil fuels from millennia ago. But the bottom line is that when you analyze sunspots and other things, there just doesn't seem to be a pattern. Some people think they find patterns. We've had some very prominent scientists go out there and say, look, I found a pattern. And then
Willie Soon believes there's a huge pattern, and he's produced graphics that show the correlation to solar activity is much better than the correlation to CO2.
Well, that's true in some cases. The bottom line is that the sun is remarkably stable and has been for quite some time. We get small variations, but I will say this, a better candidate for change in temperature has to do with clouds. Dr. Roy Spencer pointed this out, that we just need a couple of percentage points in the change of cloud cover in the United States to see the kind of changes that we've had associated with warming. And so for me, I don't think solar is the main driver. It's one of them, but it's not the key to the whole thing. Anyway, that wraps it up for this episode of Climate Change Roundtable. We thank you for your questions and for participating. I thank our panelists, Linnea and Sterling. Be sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that like button and let us know how we're doing. For Linnea and for Sterling, I wish you a good Friday. And well, it's not Good Friday yet. A good day. It'll be Good Friday sometime soon next week.
Friday.
Yeah, I don't know why I keep saying that. Anyway, good whatever day it is.
It's a pretty good Friday.
Yeah, thank you. Keep watching, and thanks for participating. Bye-bye.
How dare you!